So, the City of Toronto, as you heard, not stepping into phase 2 of reopening come Friday, something our mayor agrees with, but the preparations are well underway for when the province eventually gives that go-ahead. The restaurant business has been seriously impacted by the shutdown. The city hoping to make things easier when it comes to patio spaces. There's a lot to discuss here. We're going to bring in Mayor John Tory, who joins us via Skype again this morning. Good morning to you, Mayor.
Hey, Mel, how you doing?
I'm okay. I'll be honest. When I was watching this provincial announcement, it kind of felt like when you're getting picked for a team, right? You, and then finally you're left standing there thinking, oh, man, I don't get to play. And I think a lot of Torontonians felt Torontonians, those living in Peel, felt very left out. But it's something that you say extra precautions need to be taken here. I understand that. Do you think that we are stepping into stage 2 very soon, though?
Yes, I do. And I think that, as you said, we have been taking the steps to allow businesses to be prepared. So we've got extensive guidelines out to the hair salons and the nail salons and the restaurants and the bars so that when the day comes, they're ready right away to move. We've said on some things like these extra patios we're going to permit that we will get those turned around right away so that people won't have to wait around for weeks applying for permits and doing red tape paperwork. But the bottom line has to be this. And I was out on the Danforth on the weekend, and I listened to some tales of tragedy in the context of businesses that have been around for 20 years that were right on the edge now. But the only thing that they said that would be worse for them than having a few extra days where we have to wait to get the health numbers right would be if we got it wrong and they had to close down again, say, in September because we messed it up. And so I think that people understand, as much as they're frustrated and as much as they have been very patient and very cooperative, they understand that the right thing to do is to open up when things are right, not because it says there's a certain date on the calendar or because some other place did it that has better numbers. Our numbers are getting better, but they need to get a little better yet before we can open up.
When we look at those numbers, dissect those numbers, Dr. Eileen de Villa was saying yesterday, looking at that 14-day downward trend, it looks like we're pretty much there. So let's, aside of the numbers, is the city ready logistically to get things going?
I believe so. I mean, we've been dealing with other things that I think are going to come a little later on when thousands of people start coming to work downtown in the office towers and so on, in terms of how to cope with the transit aspects of that and things like that. But I think in terms of the sort of safety requirements that we're going to ask of restaurateurs and bars and having the patios ready and dealing with different things that have to do with the pedestrian safety and all those kinds of things you've been hearing about, yes, we are. And I think that we've seen it as our job to get ready so when the day comes that the province can lift the order, that people can get back in business with dispatch, because it's a short season for things like patios, and that applies to the restaurants and bars. But, you know, most of all, what we've been trying to focus on is, yes, being ready, but most of all, making sure we're ready in a way that can keep people safe, because no one is going to thank us for 3 extra days or 5 extra days of shops being open and so on if 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks from now, we have some huge uptick again and we have to start closing things down. That is a nightmare that we're all trying to avoid, and that's what this extra few days, I think, is going to help us to avoid.
Our camera this morning is hanging out by that Yonge Steeles border, looking at the businesses that are there. Is it naive to think that Torontonians are going to stay within the city boundaries and not look to services outside of Toronto?
Well, my guess is that a lot of people who live in the northern boundaries go to Markham or Thornhill or go to Vaughan to get their hair cut or to shop or do things like that anyway. I mean, the borders are sometimes, meaningless except to people that have to worry about government services or whatever. So people will do what they're going to do. I don't think they will go in thousands. I don't think you're going to see traffic jams heading north or east today to get stuff done. And I think people also understand, that a few days invested now to make sure we have the health in a situation where it needs to be will pay positive dividends later for the very same businesses and for the very same people who want to get back to a normal life. I said in the media yesterday, no two people in Ontario want Toronto, and Peel for that matter, but I'm the mayor of Toronto, want Toronto to be opened up sooner, more so than me and Premier Doug Ford. I know that because we talk to each other about this, but we also are very conscious of our responsibilities to keep people safe and to make sure that this is done when we're ready to do it based on the numbers, not based on the calendar.
While we're looking at some of those numbers, you mentioned in your press conference yesterday the potential for some massive service cuts because of COVID-19. Thousands could lose their jobs, and you're calling on the feds and the province for more funding. Where does all of that stand?
Well, it stands in the following. We've had an expression of support from the federal government. It was very modest as a first step. We've had certainly an expression of support and some support behind the scenes from the Premier. And we now need the province to put some money on the table and say they're going to help municipalities. It isn't just Toronto. It's all the municipalities where people are watching out across southern Ontario. They all are struggling because they've lost money on their transit system. They've lost money on their land transfer taxes and different things like that they've been put to much greater expense looking after people during the pandemic. That's our job. But municipalities don't have the ability to borrow money, and nor should they borrow money for a deficit. And they also just don't have the same latitude to raise money through. We really only just have the property tax. And I think a massive property tax increase right now would be totally inappropriate if we're trying to have a recovery. And I think cuts to services, like in Toronto, we would literally have to cut transit service by half. Because our shortfall in money is so big. It's $1 billion plus. So I just don't think those things are advisable right now. And the province and federal government do have the means to help us. And we're just asking that they should do so and do it quickly.
Absolutely. All right. So we're going to keep a very close eye on the timelines and hopefully Toronto back up and running shortly. Mayor John Tory, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Mel. We all hope so, too.